gold. It's a human obsession. I'm not really sure why, honestly. It's been one of the most influential materials ever discovered, which is strange, because it doesn't actually keep you alive or warm or safe. I guess it just makes you look good. But gold's something we're obsessed with. And it's been more than just historical. I mean, if the absolutely true history, as taught to me by board games, is to be believed, from our very first days, we've been obsessed with gold, using it as a resource, and also crafting jewelry from it. We've even done things like build our ships to transport it, and we've sent people across the country, in part, looking for it, and that's just America. Now, when it comes to America, and America's gold fixation, which doesn't just belong to us, the mid-1800s was a particularly interesting time, because the gold rush was in full effect, and from all corners of America, prospectors, men with vision and more greed than sense, rushed to the particularly fertile hills and mountains of California, where they thought, for sure, gold was to be found. Boom towns sprung up all of a sudden, sometimes literally overnight, and fortunes were made and lost based on, well, what was found in them thar hills. Today we're going to be looking at a game that uses that setting as its dressing, but surprisingly isn't actually as obsessed with gold as you might think. It's an excellent game. It's one of my top 10, actually, if you listen to our podcast. It is Gold West by Tasty Minstrel Games. In Gold West, 2 to 4 players are going to take on the roles of prospectors, people who have come to California to try to find their fortune. They'll be mining and extracting resources like gold, copper, silver. They'll be gathering up stone and wood to build out their settlement empire, all in the name of turning the greatest profit and gathering the most influence over Boomtown, shipments, and the terrain itself. So the first and most important part of Gold West is, well, the West. This is the board set up for 4 players. And if you've got less than 4 players, you'll actually flip a couple of these terrain tiles over and they'll be blank. And on each of these spots, a different terrain tile is going to be set. And they're each of the 4 different terrains. You've got mountains and hills and forests and I'm going to go ahead and say valleys, crags, something. They look like holes in the ground. Anyway, on your turn, you're going to be placing encampments on this board, and every time you do, you're going to pick up one of the tokens, and you'll get the resources that are depicted on there. Now, each of the tokens, as I said, is one of the 4 colors, and that means that that color resource is likely to show up on that token. But as you can see here, sometimes you get something unexpected. Like on this gold token, you get gold, yes, but you also get copper, whereas here in this forest, you get wood, but you also get stone. And as you expand on the board, like let's say I settle this spot, and not settle, I'm sorry, I'm just placing an encampment here, and we'll get to that whole mechanism in a second. As soon as I do that, I've successfully spread the exploration, and so we flip over all the new tiles that are adjacent to my most recent settlement, showing not just me, but everybody what's available to grow from there. This is a player board. Everybody starts with one. And at the beginning of the game, it's going to be full of all of your encampments and all of your settlement discs. And the difference between those I'll get to in 1 second. Now, as I said a moment ago, basically if on your turn, you're going to have to place 1 encampment. And the way you do that is you're going to spend either a wood, which is the green, or a stone, which is the black. You'll spend one or the other. You'll pick a spot, either adjacent to the river or adjacent to yours as you start to build, Let's say I wanted to build right there. I could spend my 1 wood and place my encampment there. The adjacent tokens would flip over. I'd get those 2 resources, and then I'd take this forest token, and I'd place it in the influence track. As you set up encampments or build settlements, you will be filling up these terrain influence spaces, and the person who has the most of each one will get a different score bonus at the end of the game, first place or second place. Now, this section of the player board is very interesting. Remember these 2 resources that I got? I got a silver and a wood for setting up a camp, in that spot. Well, this is your resource, or your supply track, and the way it works is on the Mancala system. So essentially, when I gather resources, they're not immediately available to me. I may choose to place them in any one of these 4 containers. Now, if I put them all the way down here, I immediately score 3 points, or 2 or 1. Why would I ever not score bonus points? Well, at the beginning of my turn, in order to gain access to these resources, you activate that whole Mancala mechanism. So, if it's the beginning of my turn, I have the option of taking all of the bits in one of these containers and then dropping one at a time, moving up the supply track. They only then become available to me once I move them out of the 0 spot. And so that's the cost benefit. If I place them here, I'll get a point, but it'll be a turn before I can use both of them. If I place them here, I get nothing, but I can use them next turn. If they're not high priority, I can always place them all the way down there, but it's going to be a while before I see them. So these encampments that you're building are the most basic way of expanding your territory. You can also build settlements, and that's why I keep correcting myself, settlements and encampments and whatever. If I want to expand to this spot, and I have wood and stone, I can pay both of these to build a settlement, not just an encampment. I still get these resources as normal, and I use one of those discs to represent that I've made a proper settlement. And the bonus for making a settlement, right off the bat, is when I go to place this token on my influence track, it doesn't go in the next slot, it skips one, making it that much easier to gain those big bonus points at the end of the game. So these terrain bonuses, the ones that I've mentioned already, those are endgame scoring. There are 3 other ways of gaining major points as the game progresses. The first is investments. Investments are essentially like quests, and what you're doing is you're spending metal. In fact, there's a whole phase of the game about spending metal. You're going to be using the ore that you're collecting from building those encampments and settlements to buy victory points. When you get enough of these, you're going to get a huge advantage. Over here is the second way that you can spend your metal in the game, and that is to advance your shipping line. Every time you spend one of your ore, copper, silver, or gold, you'll advance your carriage along the path. Cross certain critical thresholds, you'll get points, and the first person to get across there will get a big bonus, the second person will get a smaller bonus, and anybody who follows will get basically nothing. The final way that you can spend metal in order to secure victory points is in Boomtown. Now, each of these 2-section tiles is placed randomly and chosen randomly at the beginning of the game. So you could have not just a different choice of options, but a different physical layout. And that matters because you're going to use this grid. So to secure these 4 points, for example, you're going to pay 2 copper. Whereas to get one of your influence tokens on, let's say, this spot on the surveyor's office, which gives you 1 point per building in your longest line, that's going to cost you a copper and a silver. If you then, or somebody else, spent a gold and a copper, they could hop on that other section of that Boomtown space, and if you've got both tokens, well, you're going to score double for that. Now that's the basics, but that's pretty much it. Gold West is a mechanically straightforward game. The complexity really comes from which scoring tokens are showing up in this game, and that'll sort of help you inform what your strategies are. Maybe you take a look at the investment cards and you think, oh wow, that's a lot of points. Am I starting, or can I expand to a space that'll give me the right metals to secure those contracts? But the beautiful thing about this game, aside from the sort of like sepia, old-timey Western theme that I'm a total sucker for, the beautiful thing about this game is that in its simplicity, it really does encourage you to just go. Everywhere you expand gets you something. Everything you do nets you a few points. And let's say that you can't get all of the ore necessary to buy those investment cards. Well, there are probably expansion opportunities in Boomtown, or maybe you could send some of your carriages away with that ore that's not otherwise doing you any good, and that actually grab you a whole boatload of points. There are no boats in this game. I don't know why I used that phrase. Basically, Gold West is great because Gold West encourages you to play Gold West. And the other thing about it that's really interesting is that it is tight. The game has an absolute turn limit. It's 10 turns in a 4-player game, and I think 12 turns in a 2 to 3-player game. So everything that happens is going to happen quick. And so these little expansions that you make add up really fast. And at the end of the game, you're scoring points for your terrain influence, you're scoring points for any bonuses that you might have gotten from the Boomtown, you're scoring points from your biggest contiguous block of encampments and settlements that you've managed to make. And all using these 5 resources that you're never encouraged to hoard. The game wants you to spend those resources, make your encampments, expand your territory, grow. Well, it's just like the boom of the era. And oddly, even though leftover resources are worth something at the end of the game, Gold West isn't obsessed with gold. It's obsessed with exploration. And that's something we absolutely love about it. And that's Gold West by J. Alex Kevern and Tasty Minstrel Games. It's one of my favorite games because it's a game that really encourages you to dive right in. It's tight, it's fast, and like I say, it may be about the gold rush, but it's not particularly obsessed with hoarding resources. Instead, it encourages this rapid expansion and exploration that I think is really a lot of fun. It plays really well 2 players. It scales up to 4 very nicely. There isn't a ton of player interactivity. You can kind of mess with each other by plopping a settlement in the way if somebody's trying to build a line or a big mass of settlements, but otherwise you don't really have too much of an opportunity to mess with each other, and honestly, that's just fine with us. Thanks for checking out our videos. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, favorite, subscribe. Check out our reviews on Gameosity.com for more game review goodness. If you've got any games you think we'd like to see us review, please leave it in the comments below, and we'll see you next game.